My friends, Guy Haley's Genefather came out 2 weekends ago, and normally I would have made a review video before now, but TwitchCon was last weekend, there was just a lot going on. But this is one of the books I've been anticipating the most this year. Guy Haley takes two of the smartest characters in Warhammer and pits them against each other in Genefather. Archmagos Dominus Belisarius Cawl and the Clone Lord himself, Fabius Bile. This is clearly one of the most recognized game stories that Black Library has ever put out. So let's break it down.
There is no peace amongst the stars, for in the grim, dark future, there is only war.
Guy Haley's Genefather is an exercise in parallels and reflections. The book starts off with two very similar chapters. One about Belisarius Cawl talking with his creation Alpha Primus, and the other focuses on Fabius Bile and his interaction with his creation, Porter. Alpha Primus, who is essentially the very first Primaris Space Marine, has had a vision that Fabius Bile is going to attempt something that will disrupt Belisarius Cawl's plans. This is immediately confirmed in the very next chapter when Fabius Bile, Porter, and a cohort of their beastmen look to the Dark Mechanicum for information on Belisarius Cawl's whereabouts. Fabius Bile makes a deal with the Dark Mechanicum adept Columbari Inas. Known as the first among equals and a disciple of Null, Columbari Inas is given a quote, ancient android that once plagued humanity. What I actually believe to be an ancient man of iron. In return, he not only joins Fabius Bile as an ally, but he also gives him the information of where Belisarius Cawl's Arch Mechanicus will be. On the other end of the galaxy, Belisarius Cawl is getting a check-in from the only other person in the galaxy who can tell him what to do, Lord Regent Roboute Guilliman. Now that the majority of the Primaris Space Marines have been disseminated throughout the galaxy, Guilliman is looking to Cawl's next big project, creating their own pylon network. And this focuses on a problem that is a rare instance of Cawl not being able to fulfill a promise all on his own. He has enough knowledge and material to build a single pylon and get it to work, but trying to make an array requires more. In order to think out a solution, Belisarius Cawl brings out an advisor that is actually one of the most blasphemous creations he's ever made. In order to talk to Roboute Guilliman across the vast distances of the galaxy, Belisarius Cawl created the Cawl Inferior, a suspected psychic abominable intelligence that connects the two leaders of the Imperium. But Cawl has gone a little further than that. He went so far as to essentially create an abominable intelligence that is modeled after Roboute Guilliman, called the Guilliman Inferior. And from time to time, he uses this Guilliman Inferior to bounce ideas off and to gauge the reactions of the actual Primarch. After consulting with these two advisors, Belisarius feels that he needs to bring on other Forge Worlds in order to help him with this task. Begrudgingly, he reaches out to the Forge Worlds of Metallica, Akatran, and Tigris in order to form a development pact. As Belisarius Cawl gathers his allies, Fabius Bile is doing the same. He is trying to steal Belisarius Cawl's research, and in order to do that, he would have to attack the most advanced ship in the entire Imperium, the Arch Mechanicus, the Zarquisitor. Although Bile is an incredible warrior with 10,000 years of experience, it would still be suicide to attack this ship without any type of allies. So, in order to ensure his victory and grow his own armies, Fabius Bile treats with Lord Dandamus Thrul. In order to secure this allegiance, Dandamus Thrul proposes a contest of creations. Both Thrul and Bile are genitors of enormous talent, and this is an excellent opportunity for Bile to show off Porter, one of his new men. This daughter of Fabius Bile easily defeats the mutants of Dandamus Thrul, and they acquire their new army. At this point, Belisarius Cawl has set up the meeting between himself and the three Forge Worlds. And he's bringing along a relatively familiar face, the 89th iteration of Freydish Adam Silip Cuvo, Belisarius Cawl's constantly resurrected best friend. The previous iteration, Cuvo 88, is still alive, but he's heading to Imperium Nihilus with Roboute Guilliman. Cawl, being a somewhat lonely and sentimental creature, creates Cuvo 89 so that he still has access to his best friend. Together, the two friends head to Pontus Avernus, an artificial world that was created during the Dark Age of technology and claimed by the Imperium. This is supposed to be a meeting between allies, but Belisarius Cawl was never very trusting. On the surface of this artificial world, Belisarius Cawl deploys the Knights of House Tyrannus, a knight house that's been employed to him since the earliest days of the Indomitus Crusade. And after landing and meeting with the masters of these Forge worlds, that might have seemed like a good idea. This conversation between high-ranking tech adepts swiftly turns from a friendly conversation about alliances to accusations being levied against Belisarius Cawl. Led by the tech priest turned inquisitorial representative Frank Gamma 87 Nu 3 Psi, the masters of the Forge Worlds accuse Belisarius Cawl of being a heretic. Finding himself basically on trial, Cawl has to convince these magi that he is not doing anything that is outside of the bounds of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Cawl goes on to create a beautiful philosophical argument about how he doesn't actually do new science or innovation, but simply follows the pathways of the ones that came before them, taking old methodologies and applying them until he develops the same things that the Dark Age humans did. Thoroughly convinced, the masters of the Forge Worlds agree to help Cawl with his endeavor, and that is when all hell breaks loose. The forces of Fabius Bile attack Pontus Avernus, and Fabius Bile goes on a boarding mission to Cawl's Arch Mechanicus. From here, events swiftly cascade. Dandamus Thrul and his creations are fighting the Knights of House Tyrannus on the surface of Pontus Avernus. Deep within this artificial world, it's revealed that one of the Magoses in charge of a Forge world was actually a Dark Mechanicum adept working for Fabius Bile. Alexia Dios, an ally of Columbari Inas, gets a hold of Cuvo 89 and uses his connection to Belisarius Cawl in order to shut off the defense systems of the Zarquisitor. With the defenses of the Arch Mechanicus down, Fabius Bile very easily boards it, distracting Belisarius Cawl by releasing a Necron cryptek that Cawl had locked away in the holds of his Arch Mechanicus. Fabius Bile sets off in search of his prize. It's been speculated up until this point that Fabius Bile was looking for the Sang Primus Portum, the key to the gene research that allowed the Emperor to create the Primarchs and therefore the Space Marines. But Cawl quickly realizes that Fabius Bile cannot get to the Sang Primus Portum. It's too heavily defended. So what else on the ship has the culmination of Belisarius Cawl's work? Alpha Primus. Alpha Primus this entire time has been repelling boarders from the Zarquisitor, and eventually he heads off Fabius Bile in order to stop him from getting further into the ship. But this is exactly what Fabius Bile wanted. Not only to get Alpha Primus alone, but to have him face off against Fabius Bile's own creation, Porter. A fight ensues between the two masterpieces, but ultimately Alpha Primus comes out on top. Fabius Bile, never one to play completely fair, sedates Alpha Primus and starts to harvest his gene seed. Belisarius Cawl, who had just subdued the Necron cryptek that had been released, comes across Fabius Bile working on Alpha Primus. But in his weakened, damaged state, he isn't able to stop the Clone Lord, and Fabius Bile gets away. After running off the rest of Fabius Bile's armies, the masters of the Forge Worlds pledge their allegiance to Belisarius Cawl. In the end, Fabius Bile and Belisarius Cawl neither had complete victory or complete defeat. Fabius Bile was able to harvest the gene seed that he needed, but he also found out that Belisarius Cawl's creations can best his own. And although Belisarius Cawl has the allegiances that he needs to complete his work, he failed in protecting the Emperor's own research, and he might have inadvertently strengthened the enemies of the Imperium. And that is where our story ends. Alright, right off the bat, if you're looking for my opinion on this book, this is one of my favorite books of the year and probably one of the best reads of the year. Easily 5 stars on Goodreads for me. But let me tell you why, starting with the characters. The main focus of this book seems to be relationships. The paternal relationships between Cawl and Bile and their creations are paramount here. These two incredible minds connect very closely to their creations. And that is in direct contrast to the Emperor of Mankind, who saw his creations as tools. As much as he called the Primarchs his sons, he referred to them privately as numbers, and really they were just a means to an end. But I think these two have taken a different approach to saving humanity than the Emperor did. The Master of Mankind created superhumans in order to subjugate the rest of the galaxy. Cawl and Bile both have a dream of saving humanity in 2 different ways that involve improving mankind from within. They are still masters of war and violence, don't get me wrong, but they do have a unique outlook on how to proceed forward as a species. And the care with which they have for their creations that represent this progress is unparalleled. Cawl even admits to putting some of his own genetic makeup into Alpha Primus. This was an unexpected but greatly appreciated focus. The other two characters that really made this book, besides Fabius, Bile, and Cawl, were Cuvo 89 and Alpha Primus. And it's because during an emergency, they're still having existential crises themselves. Cuvo is trying to figure out what exactly being Freydish Adam Silip Cuvo really means, and how does he reconcile his affection for Cawl and his hatred of being resurrected over and over. Alpha Primus's crisis is a little darker. He is a masterpiece of gene work done by Cawl, but there are still little things about him that are flaws. His soul has essentially been misseated in his body. And because of his incredible mind, he's incredibly self-aware. He knows why he was made, and he knows his role in the universe. With all of that, he's still trying to balance being the veritable son of Belisarius Cawl. So much so that he admits to himself that he's not even really loyal to the Imperium like that, but rather more loyal to Cawl. It's revealed that the gene seed of Alpha Primus might actually be the amalgamation of several genetic codes from several Primarchs. So I'm interested to see going forward how that affects his life outlook and his loyalties. Now let's talk about the things that this book did well. First and foremost, never get another author besides Guy Haley to write Belisarius Cawl. The Great Work is an incredible book, also written by Guy Haley, about Belisarius Cawl, but I think this version of him goes even further with being authentic to the character. Guy Haley, in the introduction of this book, says that he put more jokes and more humor into this intentionally. And it really does show through. Belisarius Cawl is incredibly whimsical while being surrounded by this grimdark setting. And it doesn't seem disjointed, it seems very natural as Belisarius Cawl navigates the social hierarchies of the Imperium. His character is extremely independent, and if he were to have the same temperament as everybody else, it really wouldn't make sense. Secondly, and I'm not sure if this is a thing, but this book had incredible word economy. It's only about 270 pages, but I got so much information, there wasn't a single wasted page here. It is a perfect length, and it's very accessible for people who might not know a ton about Belisarius Cawl or Fabius Bile. And the last really good thing it did well was showing the internal politics of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Even when humanity is on the line and Rabute Guilliman is calling for aid from everywhere, they still have their own internal politics and conflicts that get in the way of that. And it's not just interpersonal relationships, it's also religious dogma that gets in the way. There are a lot of interpretations of the Cult Mechanicum, and how someone presents their own interpretation is how other people react to them. And it was very cool to see that during the trial of Belisarius Cawl. Now on to things I didn't really like, and there's really only one. This book was very good. I know that some characters are meant to just be plot devices and not really develop or lend anything greater to the story. But personally, I would have liked to see more of Aseneth Au, the Necron Cryptek. Belisarius Cawl stole her from an Inquisitor and keeps her around in hopes of forming some type of alliance with the Necron. And it makes sense, right? He's trying to create a pylon network made out of the original Necron pylons. But in the end, at least in this book, she was really just used as a plot device to distract Cawl. It's a little nitpicky, but that's the only problem I really had with the book. Now, there are only a couple of things that surprised me about this story, and they're both good. The first being is this book's portrayal of night houses. A lot of times when authors are writing about night houses, and I'm thinking about Vengeful Spirit or the Iron Kingdom, they focus on the politics of the night houses. And I love it. They are very backstabby while trying to be chivalrous, and they just make for great characters. But in this book, Guy Haley focuses more on the religious aspect of knights. Rusev, the scion of House Tyrannus, shows an incredibly deep devotion to the machine god. In his battle litanies, in how he communicates with other knights, even in relation to his own mount, he is always venerating the machine god. And that's just a side of the night houses that I don't get to see a lot of. The second surprise really shouldn't be a surprise at this point. But every time I read about Belisarius Cawl, he one-ups himself in the lengths that he'll go to achieve his goals. In this book alone, he made an abominable intelligence of a living Primarch. Something he himself is very aware will get him killed. And in the same book, he steals a Necron from an Inquisitor. Cawl has been given a lot of lenience because of his service to the Imperium, but even this is pushing the bounds. When there is an end to Belisarius Cawl, it'll most definitely be because of his hubris. I predict that Genefather by Guy Haley is going to be one of those classic Warhammer books that everybody recommends, like Eisenhorn or The Infinite and the Divine. Belisarius Cawl and Fabius Bile is such a natural character conflict that it makes for a very entertaining and easy read. This book not only had me glued to its pages, but it also has so many setups for things that are going to come in the 42nd millennium. But what do you all think? Have you read Genefather yet? And if you have, let me know what you thought in the comments below. Make sure you leave a like, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you all in the next one.